Welcome to the Authority File. I'm Bill Mickey, your host and the editorial director at Choice. For this series, my guests and I are discussing an important topic: how to support students from diverse backgrounds, students of color in particular, to feel prepared and empowered for successful professional futures within and outside the academy. We'll also be talking about how academic publishers can play a part by fostering diverse voices in research, in the classroom, and beyond. Joining me for the discussion will be Dr. Rihana Mason, a research scientist at Georgia State University's Urban Child Study Center and an adjunct faculty member at Spelman College, Dr. Pamela Queen, associate professor in finance at Morgan State University, Miranda Nunhofer, vice president of research at Sage Publishing, and Todd Baldwin, vice president, library editorial and DC executive lead at Sage Publishing. In this third episode of our Sage Publishing sponsored series, we'll discuss some of the ways we can foster more diverse voices in academic publishing. So Todd and Miranda, I'm going to stick with you. Both of you obviously have deep experience in academic publishing, and to my understanding, people who work in academic publishing are a relatively homogenous group. Can you talk about some of the barriers that exist in improving the diversity of academic publishing houses?
Well, it's true. We are a pretty homogenous group. And that's because we often recruit and hire from a pool of people who have academic publishing experience. So we reflect our history in lots of ways. So one of the things that we're looking at doing is, for example, dropping that requirement, looking towards more diverse candidate pools in adjacent or related issues. So we have to look beyond ourselves to address that problem. And we can do a better job of diversifying our talent across the organization if we do that. You know, the other piece is we just need to help students from diverse backgrounds understand that publishing is an opportunity for them. They need to see it as a career that they want to go into. So for entry-level positions, we're doing a better job of partnering with a broader range of colleges and universities, just doing more effective outreach. And it becomes, when it's a stated objective, and it is for us, then you can actually find opportunities to do better outreach to more groups. And so we're working with intern coordinators and career centers to pull in those diverse students, and we're identifying them now, and we're continuing to identify them. And we're helping them to understand what a career in publishing looks like and how it might be the right path for them. When we bring students, interns into Sage, we give them publishing courses. We help them to understand the full range of the business so that they can see all the parts of it and how rich and rewarding it is and how it could be an option for them. And another thing that's happening recently is as more and more people are working remotely, we're not going to be tied to communities in which we are headquartered. So we know that there's not a huge amount of diversity in our county in California where our headquarters is based, but we're increasingly hired remote-based workers so that they can. We have a more diverse pool of applicants that we can work with to try to expand our diversity that way. But for me, it comes back that publishing is very much symbiotic with academia. So, we reflect the composition of academic faculty in lots of ways, right? Our author pools are drawn from academia. So again, we have to continue to partner with the Academic Pipeline Project, with the PhD Project, with Leading Roots in the UK, to help get minority students into academia, help them to become faculty, and then become authors within Sage. We see our futures as being very much intertwined. The other thing I just want to say is that within Sage, we have a very active diversity, equity, and inclusion program with a pretty developed structure. It's developed, but then as soon as we build it, it changes as the world changes around us and as we discover new needs of our staff. I think it's really important, and it's for all organizations, but I think publishing organizations especially, is just making sure that all of our staff, regardless of their background or experiences, feel that their organization is a place that they can belong, that they have a voice in that organization, that they can make a difference in both in their work and in the real world through the work of that organization. And right now, we're really focused on having important and courageous conversations with all our staff to make sure that they feel that they're a part of this enterprise and that they can contribute to it. Because, we have diversity within our staff, and we need to make sure that they all are having an impact on who we are as an organization. And we want to make sure that they believe that what they're doing is part of this larger enterprise.
Okay, excellent. Miranda, anything you want to add?
No, just to agree with everything Todd said, really. And I guess, yeah, we're looking at it and obviously getting a much more diverse representation in the business. And that's really at all levels. So, through interns, but we're also looking at new recruitment strategies, trying to bring people from diverse backgrounds in at higher levels. And as I think Todd was saying, really looking at going outside the kind of publishing skill set so that we can get people from adjacent industries or similar skill sets to come in across the different levels of the business. And we definitely sort of likewise have a bit of a pipeline issue in terms of bringing people in, but also bringing people through the organization. So going back to the point around creating an environment that people want to stay in, that people can progress in, we definitely have issues around gender as well, in terms of making sure that we have this a similar representation at the top of the business as we do in the rest of the business. So there's a lot of work to be done, I think, in scholarly publishing overall, and yeah, just at the start of a lot of work to make some significant changes, which are really important.
Mm-hmm. So, Dr. Queen, I think we mentioned earlier the case studies that you've been writing. Can you talk about that work, writing those, and how does diversity factor into your work on those?
Sure. So I enjoy writing many of the case studies because it helps me, one, with having more innovation in my classroom, but it also allows me to better prepare students for what they'll expect, helping them to kind of address issues that we don't normally cover in some of our typical papers and typical books. And so I address diversity in a few ways. One, I always use women as the protagonists. So it's always a woman who's involved with making a decision or leading the charge to address some of the issues that we cover. But I also cover some of the social issues that are very, germane to folks of color, or people may want to dive into or have debate about. So I look at issues like the spending that a state does on incarceration versus education, and how are those policies set, and how can we change those policies. I look at issues around ethics in advertising, around the mass shootings that we've had and the products that came out for bulletproof products for kids. Does that make sense from a socially conscious company to talk about advertising something that may or may not be as protective as they allude to? How do we address the role of government and business? We all possibly agree that we should have warning labels on tobacco products because of the cause of tobacco. But how about having warning labels on fatty foods that lead to obesity and that cost to society, and as well as the cost of prescription drugs, and looking at these things from the lens of someone who may have felt the impact of the cost of insulin in their family. And so those kind of things are topics that engage students and make them want to, want to be involved in the decision making at the business level. And so it prepares my students better for critical thinking, addressing tough problems, and to be ready to look at things from a different lens. And so I think cases are good because a lot of times you can talk about topics that some of the traditional journals wouldn't think are our best fit for them. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm very attracted to using cases as a way of educating and teaching students.
Excellent. Okay, so Rihana, you write about how the culturally relevant aspects of pipeline programs speak to identity elements, self-efficacy, and how students are allowed a voice in this process through decision-making, presentations, and so on. That seems to me relevant to this discussion. Can you perhaps elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure, it's very relevant to this conversation. I think in what we've heard earlier too about just being equitable across audiences, across communities, and inclusive. During an academic career, we're presented with multiple hurdles, barriers, exciting things. And I think it's part of our self development, our personal development. We're dealing with multiple things at once. And so being in a community where there is a open space to have dialogue about how you're dealing with this personal development on your way to, achieving self-competence, career self-efficacy, and your own identity of who you are and who you want to become is something that academic pipeline programs make available for students and faculty. It's also, as we become alumni of these programs, then we can be change makers on our university campuses to share this knowledge, to share, even as Pam is writing about cases, but in a classroom, we can then tell our stories at the beginning, of a course to kind of start taking away these layers where there seems to be a big gap between the student and the professor. So we can show students, who we are, have that courageous conversation, be vulnerable and transparent, and say what our journeys were actually like. We weren't always in this level of knowledge, and we're co creating knowledge even in our classrooms. So I think voice and self-efficacy, self-competence, yes, is a common thread throughout what we've talked about.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. You just heard from Dr. Rihana Mason, a research scientist at Georgia State University's Urban Child Study Center and an adjunct faculty member at Spelman College, Dr. Pamela Queen, associate professor in finance at Morgan State University, Miranda Nunhofer, vice president of research at Sage Publishing, and Todd Baldwin, vice president, library editorial and DC executive lead at Sage Publishing. Sage Publishing is the sponsor of this 4-part series of The Authority File. Join us next week for the final episodes in this series as we examine the scholarly ecosystem a little more closely, including how the incentive structures built into academic publishing and the academy are influencing, for good or for bad, how today's diverse student body is participating in the academic project.
And quite often, you can attract more, of course, students of color, women in executive master's program. And so if your goal is to, like the PhD project, is to get more diversity in the boardroom, some of the adjuncts and non-tenure track faculty are very helpful in helping with that process.
If you like what you hear, rate us or give us a review on your podcast platform of choice. As always, sponsorship and advertising for the Authority File podcast are handled by Choice's advertising manager, Pam Marino, and all of our episodes are produced by Choice's senior digital media producer, Mark Dirks, and digital media assistant, Sabrina Kofer. That's all for this week. Thanks for joining us.